G'day everyone, it's Warren from NQ Explorers. Just a little video today on detecting hunted out sites. Today I'm in a bushland setting. Obviously this doesn't really apply to a beach, but it can to a park. And the main tip I give in these situations is moving to those areas where people don't generally go. By that I mean close up against obstacles, so you need a small call for that. Under and around fallen logs if you're in a bush situation. Areas where it's difficult to get a search call because the lazy detectorists won't do it, and that's where you'll find the targets. Now you're out in the open sort of swing around hoping you're going to get a target, because if it's been hammered by every man and his dog and then some more, they're not going to be there. And the first things that go are the pennies. So if you're finding pennies, you know you're in a site that hasn't been heavily detected. Generally the last thing to go is the 50% threepences. This is from an Australian perspective, because they are a very small target of lower conductivity than the sterling silver, because they're only half silver. But what I'm going to do is, where you can see there's actually even a bit of old rubbish in this bush. It's not modern stuff, but it's been dumped there long ago, a bit of rusty iron. Get in there amongst that stuff and go to those thorny bushes and the places where you're going to get scratched up, you're going to get some damage, but you will come home with good targets. So we'll have a crack at it and see what we can get out of this site today. We may not get any sensational finds, but we'll just look at some of the areas where you might be able to make those finds in spots that have been well visited by previous detectors, you know, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and since there's been hobby metal detectors. So today's bit of gear is a Garrett AT Pro with a Nell snake coil. You could use any small coil of roughly that size. The Garrett Sniper's a ripper. Minelab and all the other big brands make smaller coils for all their machines. Doesn't matter what you're swinging, there'll be a call for it for this situation. But the critical thing about detecting hunted out sites is have a good detector. Buy the best detector you can afford. I use a Garrett, but buy it from a big company like Garrett, like Minelab, Fisher, Bounty Hunter, Technetics, XP Deus. One of those good quality brand machines that, you know, for a start you're going to get good support from the company, but it's a quality bit of gear. It's not a big box store $80 Chinese job, because you're really going to be running around with one hand behind your back in that situation. When you've got these professional level machines, you've got the very best tool for the job at hand. In this situation, and what you're going to see today, is World War II Army camp. It's very well known, easily accessible. You can get here in a mini miner if you wanted to. You don't need a four-wheel drive. And it's well detected. So you're going to run around in here and not find many targets, or you're going to find targets that have been discarded by previous detectorists, which annoys me. But all that stuff's in here. Where are you going to find targets of value is places where it's difficult to get a machine or a detector, or the detectorists are lazy. And that's going to be your tough areas. Like I said, prickly bushes, steep slopes, thickly vegetated gullies, around your log piles, fallen timber and all that kind of stuff. The number of coins I've found in army camps along fallen trees is amazing. Like, you get target after target along a fallen tree, simply because previous detectorists didn't swing the coil close enough to the obstacle. That's all you have to do. Just get your coil up against all those obstacles around the bases of the big gum trees and that kind of thing. And this would apply in a park too. A park's going to have a lot more trash than what I'm going to have to deal with here today. But it's just a matter of having a bit of a think about the easy sites and staying away from them. And you'll be rewarded if you do push into those areas. Take a bit of patience, get your discrimination right, not too much discrimination. You don't want to cut out your scratchy targets. That's the other thing you are looking for, is your one-way rough targets, is it or isn't it type of thing. When you flip it out of the ground, if the target disappears, you've discriminated it out simply because you've set the machine to do that. It may be rubbish, but if it flips out of the ground and all of a sudden the signal improves, well, it's a coin or something. That's because the machine wasn't quite sure when the target was at an awkward angle or at depth. It said maybe this is a good target. When you get it out of the ground and present it properly to the coil, you'll get an accurate target ID, and that may be good or bad, but in any case, you need to dig those scratchy signals. Okay, well, I've got a couple of signals here I'll investigate. Both are fairly sketchy, but they're jumping into the 70s. So they may be just scrap and they're not real consistent target IDs, but let's have a crack at them. First one here, up against this little gum tree, out there, I'm getting a, as you can see, it's quite jumpy. It's going from lowest target ID 60 and it's going to 84. That's not a very consistent sort of target to dig, but there's potential in there for something. It could be an irregularly shaped good target. But notice where it is, it's right up against this tree, so it hasn't had a coil pushed up there, and because we've got that little tiny snake on there, I'm able to do that. So, see if we moved it. Yes, we have. Still getting the same target response. A little bit of tone roll. Okay, I've got it. Well, I've got a metal target. I'm assuming that's the one I'm hearing on the machine. Look at that. It's a tiny little brass stud. Now, okay, that's not sensational, but it's a high tone target that has been missed by other detectorists, simply because of where it was. Now the other one, let's backfill this one first. It doesn't look like we've been here. The other one was just over here somewhere. Got to find it again with the trusty old AT Pro. As you can hear, there's a lot of targets. They're in the 50s. There's a bit of glass there. It could be a bottle actually. Could be a intact bottle there by the look of it. What's that? Not an intact bottle. It's the base of a bottle. So I've just got to find this. I had this target a couple of minutes ago. It's a scratchy little thing, but it was a high tone. Okay, well I'll report back when I find exactly where it was. Next target's this nice trunk latch. You see that's brass. Got a steel pin in that hinge, but that was a 79 solid. Right, all my sniping around the difficult spots paid off. I just got a penny, which is unusually here because generally they're the first things to go. But it's in this little bit of deep leaf litter in this old tree, or this young tree. That's looks to be in really good condition underneath all that. Let's give it a quick clean in the bush here, and we'll see if we can get a date. I can see it's a kangaroo. He's hopping to the left. I think looks like 52. Wow. Well, that post dates the use of this site by the army. To my knowledge, anyway. They may have been here then. I'm not sure. As a training ground, I guess. 1952. Still be a King George VI. Might be Elizabeth. Oh, that's nice. Pretty happy with that. 1952 kangaroo penny. Well, this may explain the 1952 penny. I've just got this beautiful Matchbox Bedford. I think it's the ambulance. I can see the white paint on it. I used to have one when I was a kid. So maybe a couple of little blokes are down in here playing with the Matchbox toys and dropped a couple of coins. I haven't dug a little car for a while. It's a nice find. Well, this is just the sort of spot I'm thinking about detecting these hunted out sites. See, there's been a bit of clearing going on. Logs have been dropped. You run your coil along these logs, move the ones you can move. Cautious of any snakes that may be in residence, of course. But that's probably not been detected under those logs. And a little coil will get in there without even moving the logs. So that's how I just got that penny and the Matchbox ambulance. So there will definitely be more in here. It's just a matter of moving into those areas that are a little bit uncomfortable, that are avoided by most detectorists, and certainly aren't touched with anything with a large coil. So you can see in here, this is a spot which is not easy to detect. We've got deep leaf litter in parts. We do have exposed soil. We've got a lot of fallen timber. Some of it's dead fallen, some's been pushed here many moons ago. As you can see, there's an old pipe there, so you've got iron involved in the situation. This is the sort of spot I love. This, see this old prickly bush that's been pushed over. If you can, drag that out of the way. Get your coil in there, and cover that ground, because that's never been detected in there. You're going to need your machine with your iron on fair bit of discrimination. Don't go too silly with the discrimination, but you're going to have a lot of iron in here. Or just go in raw, red hot, no discrimination, and just cherry pick your high targets. It'll depend on the machine you're running and your personal preferences and your experience level, of course. But I mean, that's one of the areas where I like to go. Here's another good example. This is just all bark that's fallen off this gum tree. As you can see there, the soil itself is probably 5 to 6 inches below the level of where you can get a coil at the moment. Just rake it back with your pick, get down to ground level, use a small coil. Now, to maximise your chances, keep your eyes open. This berm or windrow here that you can see in front of me is not natural. It's been pushed here. Now, you might walk past that, or someone might walk past that and say that's a little mound, but it's actually been pushed here. There's broken glass all through it. I believe that's where the army pushed the camp into this great big pile after the war. As you can see, there's some fairly substantial trees growing in it now. It's been quite a while since World War II. So potentially this is all a surface that was scraped into one big pile, and this is where a lot of the artifacts will be. So it's worth running along the top of that mound and down the sides, and where the rains washed anything out of it into these gully areas. Look in there, I mean, this is classic. You got long grass, you got difficult terrain with rocks and things, difficult to swing a coil properly, fallen timber, all sorts of things working against you here. But if you persist, there's a good chance there's something in here. Now, detecting these well-visited sites, 3 things to start out with: research, permission, equipment. You research the site, you're confident that there's potential for good finds. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's a military site or a colonial site or whatever. Determine how to get permission, or if you need permission, if it's public land or it's private property. Just because there's no fence, don't assume it's not owned by somebody. And there are various ways you can find out who owns what, from local council maps to some of the online facilities that each state provides in the government websites. So just check out if it's freehold land, or if it's leased, or it's public open space, which is and the last one is where I tend to do most of my detecting, public open space. Once you've determined that, do your recon into the site and take the right equipment once you've looked at the site to detect that site. Now, in this situation here, like I showed you earlier, I've got that smaller coil on there, a little Nell snake. Any small coil will do in this site. That's what I need to be successful here. That may not be the case where you're detecting. But as I said earlier, make sure you buy a good quality detector, or use a good quality detector. Something with a good discrimination circuit. Learn and understand your discrimination, because discrimination is the downfall of many people. And by that I mean they use far too much of it, or they don't understand it enough to use it in a way where they can hunt a site that would drive them mad otherwise. I see so many people on Facebook message groups and that kind of thing, and forums saying, oh, the site's driving me mad, there's so much there, you know, the detector's going off all the time. Well, that's a combination of not being discriminated correctly, set this correctly, and possibly the wrong size coil, and maybe even the wrong detector. I mean, if you've got the luxury of having several detectors in your arsenal, you use the one that best suits the conditions you're working on and the ground you're working in. So these are the 3 things: research, permission, equipment. And once you get here, do your recon, do your foot recon, and determine where you can maximise your chances on the site. And this is where the old maps don't really matter anymore. It's just what happens on the day is what's going on. You've got to walk around, look at areas where it's difficult to get to where there's been old buildings, where there's been old encampments, that kind of thing. Where the obvious places are, where everyone's detected, and then move into the fringes or the areas that are difficult to get to, and you will be rewarded. Now, the other thing you've got to look for is the presence of modern fill, and this will apply particularly in parks where often councils top up and top dress parks to the point where there could be even a metre of fill over old coins and relics that you might be looking from colonial or the 1800s period, pre-Federation. Well, now that's never going to be discovered because it's a metre underground, and all you're picking up is bottle tops and ring pulls. Well, you know that it's probably fill, and the best way to tell if it's fill is A, it's going to be a different soil to what is in the rest of the park or the area you're in. Or I can't demonstrate it here because I'm not in a park, but you'll see that the tree has been, large older trees have been buried. They're not naturally buttressed at the base like these are. You see in a park, if the trees just go straight into the ground, of an old Moreton Bay fig or something, you know there's a lot of fill dirt around that base of that tree, so you're not likely to find any really old relics there. They're going to be at great depth, and there's no way you can dig a 2-metre hole in a public park. So just be aware of your surroundings and where you're detecting in the environment that you're actually walking around in. You might research the history and get good history on the site, but you get there and you'll be disappointed to find that it's been filled. These army camps, for example, look where there's flat, unnatural benched areas, they're tent areas. That's where the army tents were. All this unnatural sort of activity in the bush leads you to the potential for relics. And in a hunted out site, that still applies, because if people aren't reading the country properly, they're going to miss things. Looks like an echidna burrow here, but I don't think he's been home for a while. There's another one further down the hill which looks pretty fresh. Maybe he's moved houses for the summer. Okay, so from my experience, the best way to be successful in these sites is know your equipment well. Spend a lot of hours on your machine. Know how your discrimination circuit works. Know your best settings for where you are, because that will maximise your chances for success. If the machine's not set up properly, it'll just drive you mad and you will miss potential targets. Dig the iffy signals. You're not going to go into these sites and dig these screaming 85s, 90s in the middle of nowhere where all the old pennies used to be, because they've already been dug up. And in the areas where people have been, that's where you're going to pick up your less conductive targets, your smaller targets, maybe even your little gold rings and your jewellery, and your smaller coins like your 50% silver threepence coins. They're going to be in those wide open spaces where someone's blasted through with a big coil and missed most of the ground. So it's just persistence, good equipment, set your machine up correctly, you'll do well. Well, I hope you found that helpful there, everyone. These are just the things that I do to maximise my chances in sites that I know have been well detected. You'll have your own technique and you'll develop your own way of detecting a site. Methodically, you might want to grid it, or you might have some way that you contour a site and make sure you cover ground properly. That's all up to you, but I hope you found it helpful to look in these sites where difficult obstacles to me is where I've found most of my really good relics, in these kind of sites. Places where other detectorists don't go. You're going to come home with a bit of damage, you might need some first aid at the end of the day, but you'll have a digging pouch full of good relics. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Happy fossicking. Bye for now.